Hello and welcome to the Mindful Men podcast, a show inspiring men to be mindful about their lives. Each week, we'll dive into a range of topics that matter to men and hear from everyday people doing extraordinary things. So if you love the show, please give it a 5-star rating and share it with your mates. Now, before we get into this week's episode, please note that some of the content may trigger you. And if this happens, please reach out to your support networks. It's really important. If you can't get enough of Mindful Men, head over to our website. It's www.mindful-men.com.au. Find the show notes and the links to our socials there. But for now, sit back, relax, and let's get mindful. G'day guys, and welcome to another episode of the Mindful Men podcast. I'm your host, Simon Rinnie, and today we're getting mindful about supporting veterans and first responders to maximise their health and well-being. And joining me for today's discussion, I've got Shane Dimech from Sunshine Coast, Queensland. How are you going, Shane?
I'm great, thank you.
Shane, I'm really looking forward to having this chat with you. We're just talking off air about you're currently staying in Landsborough. We've got some bushfires over that way this past week. How have you gone with the bushfires? Has everything been okay?
Yeah, it was a bit close to home the other day. So last Saturday we got evacuated, but we left before we needed to. And then, the same happened again on Sunday. So had a few days of some high adrenaline and very glad that I had my daughter here with me to keep me on the safer side of things because I like running towards adrenaline. So it was good to have her here to drag me away and keep her safe and out of harm's way.
Did the fires come close to the home?
Yeah, they were about 250 metres away. The wind was blowing them parallel to the road, so it was keeping it away from us. But then that was on the Saturday, and then on the Sunday, the wind changed directions towards the house. So, we're definitely out of here for that one.
And what were you feeling like having the fire so close? Like, what was going on inside? This is not a show about fires, but let's just talk about this for a moment because it's happening at the moment.
Adrenaline, I guess. I got caught in the middle of fires up in Darwin years ago, and I was driving around in a Land Cruiser with the firefighting gear on the back spraying fires and absolutely loved it. And, so I just wanted to go and do something the other day. But, my daughter kept me out of that. And it was, as the sun started going down and you could see just how bright the glow was just over the road from us, it was pretty daunting.
Now, you're a veteran, you're a father as well, you're a yoga teacher, and you have this amazing passion for volunteering in the wellness space, particularly around assisting our veterans and first responders to maximise their health and well-being. And I guess it's timely that we're having a talk about fire because our first responders include fireys as well. But before we get into your story, I'm really keen to hear, I love talking to dads. So what's it mean to you to be a dad?
It means the world to me. So we went through 6 years of IVF to get our little baby. So it was very structured and planned the whole way. But then to have a little human come into the world that you're, I guess, responsible for bringing up and teaching the way of life is very, very rewarding. So I've got a very chilled daughter, which makes parenting very easy and very rewarding for me.
How old is your daughter?
She's 8.
8. Oh, lovely. Oh, we're in the 3-year-old and the 6-year-old stage, so you're a little bit further ahead. What have I got to look forward to in the next 2 years?
A lot of why, questioning everything. She already thinks that she's right about everything now. She can't be because I am. So, it's just beautiful watching them grow and just seeing them along their own little journeys and just knowing that you can't, I guess, mould their personalities, but just guiding them in the right directions to keep them safe and, heading in the right way.
Yeah, I love that response. My kids are already saying why and already think they're the boss, so I'm really now petrified for the next 2 years. But Shane, your story is one of being a veteran. You were in the military, so I'd love to hear your story about military life and how you came to pursue that career. And then we'll lead in as the show goes into post-military life and the volunteering you've done. But also, let's start at the start and what caused you to sign up?
A lot of people that join the military have got it in their blood. That's what they're going to do. I never had it there. Growing up, I wanted to go to war for some reason. I didn't affiliate that with being in the military. I thought I'd be in the police. I left school at 15 and did an apprenticeship in sail making, so making sails for yachts. I finished out at 20. I was probably the youngest person there, looking after about 30 or 40 people, getting paid peanuts, and spoke to one of the older guys there about ways that I could maybe make some extra money. one of them mentioned joining the Army Reserve, and I went, righto. I went and did all the testing for that, passed all the tests, but then they wouldn't let me in because I didn't know what I was getting myself into. I'd done no research at all. So I went away going, yep, righto, whatever. And then a week later, someone from the unit rang me up and said, that's silly that you didn't get in. Come and have a chat to me for 5 minutes. I'll give you those couple of lines that they need, and we will let you in then.
Take you back. What was the reason you left school? Did you just not gel with the school life?
Yeah, I'm more of a hands-on person, so I could not wait to get out of school. So I went and did work experience in the Christmas holidays leading into year 10, and that company said, we'll give you an apprenticeship, but you need to finish school. So I really was not present at school that whole year. I was just counting down the days until I could finish my school certificate, and then left the day after. So I think the teachers were just as happy as I was to see the backside of me.
And now that you've had a bit of time since school, do you ever regret that decision?
No, I don't think another 2 years at school or university would have bettered me in what I'm doing in life now.
Yeah, and so you went and you applied to go into the reserves, and you got knocked back, and then a very short time later, you got another call saying, actually, come in and let's have a chat. What was that feeling like to get that second call and go back in there and obviously pursue this career?
Yeah, well, so I'd sort of lost my passion for what I wanted to do after my day of training, and thought, yeah, cool, this is going to be me. And then that was taken away and then brought back again. So I did go through with it. I went and had my chat, signed the dotted line, and then picked the closest date possible that I could to go and do my basic training, which my work was absolutely against. I'm sure it's probably the same now, but employers didn't really have any basis to stop you going and doing military training. So I said, well, I'm going. I went and did my 7 weeks, came back to work, and they just gave me absolute crap over what I'd just done. So I think I put up with that for 2 days, and then I just drove away and rang up my boss in the reserves and said, I want to go full-time. How do we make that happen? So I joined as a reservist. I didn't really do anything in the reserves and then went full-time.
For anyone who's listening is not even familiar what the reserves do, how does that different to the full-time gig?
So the reserves is your part-time army. So the part-time army does the same initial training to become a soldier. So you learn the same drill, weapons, fieldcraft, out bush, all that sort of stuff. And then you choose the career that you want to go down. If you want to be an infantry soldier, you'll go and do your infantry skills in Singleton. If you want to drive trucks, you go down to Puckapunyal, you'll learn how to drive trucks, and the same with all the other trades. So that training's usually split up into 2-week blocks if you need it.
Yep.
And then you're expected to show up every Tuesday night for a couple of hours for your parade. 1 weekend a month, they'll organise training out bush, and then a 2-week exercise per year. So that used to be the slogan. 1 night a week, 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks a year was the commitment. And then you're used a lot for domestic things, for the floods, bushfires, things like that in the reserves, whereas the full-time isn't used for that as much. However, during peacetime, they do get dragged into those sorts of operations.
Yeah, so what was it like going into the full-time gig pretty quickly? What was that like for you?
It wasn't too bad for me. So it ended up, I went full-time at the Army Reserve unit that I had joined at. So it was around all the same people, just doing what I'd signed up to do part-time, but doing it there full-time.
Yeah, and so did you pick a specific kind of vocation that you were going to train towards?
Yeah, so I joined artillery to start with. So that's the 105 millimetre artillery pieces, so cannons essentially. But I was up the pointy end, so I was up on a hill there on a radio, assisting the officers up there to call in fire.
And did you ever see like actual active duty?
I did when I was in a different role. I went to Iraq in 2006 for 7 months.
What was that like?
It was a lot of different emotions into one. So there was a lot of nerves, scared, excited. You join the military to do that. You're training your whole career to go to war. So it's like you've rocked up for training every night, and then the game day finally comes.
Yeah, and was game day anything like the training, or was it similar? Did you feel confident in your abilities? Talk us through that.
The training we were mainly doing back then was still, I'd call it Vietnam-based training. So we're still out bush, digging holes, putting up barbed wire, doing our patrols through the bush, whereas Iraq was urban. So it was different, but then the lead-up training that we did for 4 months before we went to Iraq was very much based on where we were going to and the jobs that we'd be doing.
Talk us through the camaraderie that you might have had with the fellow soldiers that were over there. Did you find a little pack that you hung out with and you got along really well with? Talk us through that.
Yeah, there was. So we had, I think, about 800 people that went over in our deployment. So obviously you don't get to know all of them. You just have your little group that you hang with. And yeah, it's good having people there that are trusting you with their life, and you're doing the same with them. So you build bonds that can't really be replicated back in a peacetime real world, I would compare it to.
Yeah, and so how long did your military career last for? Was it a long period, or did you fall out pretty quickly? Talk us through that as well.
I was in for 11 years, so I did 3 different jobs in that 11 years and moved around a lot. So I crammed probably a lot more into my 11 years than most people generally would. I like a bit of variety in life, so once I get bored with something, I usually move on to something else that's going to keep me excited.
And so what was the moment that you said, oh, this is no longer for me, I want to go do something different, or I need to go do something different?
We were trying to have our baby, so going through IVF, trying naturally, hardly ever at home. So if I wanted to have a child that looked like me, I really needed to be home a bit more often.
That would have taken a huge emotional toll and trying to get through, or even just conceiving naturally, but then going through the IVF as well. And I guess being home would have been a huge support for your partner as well. Did you meet her when you were in the military, or did you meet her outside?
Yeah, so I met her in 2008 when I was in Townsville. I think we met in the October or November, and then I got told in the December I was going down to Sydney. So we'd only known each other for a month, maybe 6 weeks, and then I got posted. So I wanted her to come, and I said, totally understand if you can't. She had some stuff to do in Townsville, so she came down in, I think, the late February or March, coming into 2009.
So talk us through post-military life, and I know you've had your mental health struggles as well. We've had a chat about this in previous time before today. So can you talk us through how this came up for you, and what did you do to kind of manage in the early days?
Yeah, so I got out the end of 2011 and I had a job lined up in Brisbane. I was working in boats in the Army at that time, in the Army watercraft. So I had a job lined up in Brisbane working on tugs and supervising a lot of labourers and other marine personnel. I did that for a couple of years and then got approached by another company doing the same thing. So I moved to them, same again with another company, all in the one strip along the Brisbane River. After moving to that third one, I was starting to notice I was having a lot of trouble dealing with people. Anxiety was huge of, I guess, coming from a background where you ask or you tell someone to do something, it gets done, whereas having to ask 20 times to get the most mundane little task done and wasn't getting done. I found myself trying to do everything and just was overloading myself. And that's when I decided to maybe go backwards in my life and use that sailmaking apprenticeship. I went and bought a heap of gear to set up a marine trimming business, so making boat covers, canopies, upholstery. So I left a very high-paying, secure job to sit in my garage behind a sewing machine and make some covers. That thankfully turned into a pretty thriving business very quickly, and then I bought another company out so I could have their location at Manly in Brisbane, with about 2,000 boats at my doorstep. At one stage, we got up to about 6 workers helping me along with that one. But then the people pleaser and the never saying no to anyone came in. I was taking on way too much work, consuming myself in the business, consuming myself in alcohol, not looking after everything else that was popping up and just covering everything with work and numbing out everything with alcohol.
It sounds like you were trying to push through the way that you're talking about it, going from job to job to job, creating your own business, trying to people please, as we do in small businesses. We try to please everybody so that we have the income coming through. Would you say that's a fair assessment of what you were doing?
Yeah, definitely. I wasn't letting anything that needed to come to the surface come up and get dealt with. I was just pushing it all back down. About 6 months before, we'll get to it in a minute, but before my businesses closed, that's when we finally got my daughter into the world.
Wow. And so there's not just the business pressure, but also the family and trying to conceive pressure, trying to become a dad pressure, which is huge. And I understand IVF is quite costly as well. Is that right?
Yes, it was. Doing the traditional IVF was very expensive. And when we got up to Brisbane, we found a fertility clinic. So they compare that to Qantas and Jetstar. So it's a budget version of the IVF clinic, has all the same doctors, but the doctors rotate through these clinics. So you don't have the same doctor for every appointment. Most of the nurses do the work, and there's less drugs for egg harvesting and things like that. So it's a fraction of the cost to go through the cycle, but then the freezing part is a lot more expensive. So we went through this process once. We got a really good embryo that they put in, and then there was one left that they said was the roughie. They said for the price of freezing, they probably wouldn't bother, but that's all we had. So we froze it, and that's what turned into our beautiful little bridie.
A roughie.
Yeah. 100 to 1. We put $100 on the nose, and she came through.
Wow. And that's amazing. Like, to have a roughie go through and become your daughter after so much struggle as well. What was the impact, I guess, on business as well at the same time? You mentioned that you closed the businesses not long after.
Yeah. So I really wasn't traveling well at this stage, whereas I thought, I've got a business, I've got all the toys, all the shiny things, we've got plenty of money in the bank, happily married, we finally got our daughter, so everything should be good, but it wasn't. I was starting to get a lot of suicidal thoughts and was drinking a lot by this stage.
Like most guys struggle to ask for help. Did you ask for help from anybody? Did you get help from anybody?
I did. So it took me a little while. It was our first Mother's Day. We were out on our boat for the weekend. We had a niece's birthday happening up the Brisbane River, so we went and camped out in the bay, woke up for Mother's Day, cooked breakfast, cruised up the river to this birthday, and then, so me and my wife are no longer together, but my wife at the time said, "Are you going to say anything about Mother's Day?" And I'm going, "Well, you're not my mum. It's not up to me." And it just nothing clicked with me. All I could focus on was myself, and I just had no realisation of what was happening in the world around me. I was just so consumed inside, and that was the wake-up call that I needed to ask for help. So that's when I went to the doctors, got referred to a psychiatrist, and was diagnosed with PTSD, major depressive disorder, generalised anxiety disorder, and alcohol dependence, and started on medication straight away. Played that game for about 6 months, and I didn't really see the improvement that I needed. And then it was just after Christmas coming into 2017 that I just had enough, and I went and got drunk. I gambled a lot that day and had a plan to end everything that night, and somehow ended up on the phone to, it was Vietnam Veterans Counselling Service back then, but Open Arms now. Ended up on the phone to them somehow. An ambulance came and picked me up, and I was taken to the Keith Payne unit, which is a mental health unit for veterans only at the Green Slopes Private Hospital.
Thinking about how you were presenting at work, and you said all these different jobs, then your own business, did you have a feeling it might have been linked to your military career? You talked about PTSD, or is that separate?
I don't think I gave myself time for anything from my military to sink in. So it may have changed now, but when you're in and surrounded by everyone going through the same as you, it's just normal. You don't really notice a difference. And then I went straight into work where I was busy and just kept that high flow of stress and tempo going, and didn't let anything bubble. Every Anzac Day after I got out, all the old diggers would go, "Oh, have you spoken to DBA? Have you got all your claims in?" I'm going, "Well, there's nothing wrong with me," while I'm writing myself off into an absolute drunken mess. And it wasn't until I said there was something going on and spoke to the doctors, they talked a little bit about my past and went, "Well, this is all reflections on what you've been trained for and what you've been through." But it had never clicked with me before that.
And you mentioned that you're not married anymore. What was the impact to your ex-wife?
When I went to hospital the first time, so I was in there for 3 months. During that time, I got told I'd be on medication for the rest of my life. I'd never work again, which I believe, because you don't know what you don't know. I had another business as well by then, so we sold our businesses. We had a caravan, so once I got out of hospital, we packed our house up, hopped in the caravan, went travelling for a year, which sounds ideal, but when you're not that mentally stable, putting yourself in a 22-foot box for an extended time maybe isn't the right thing to do. And we did that for 12 months. And after we settled, we split pretty soon after that.
Talk us through that traveling, because often when we struggle with a mental health condition, we feel like isolating from the world and we want to go off and just not be talked to and be on our own. What was that year actually like, being in that caravan traveling?
I found it hard to sit and relax. So I was not anywhere near in a space where I should have been looking for work, but I was looking for work the whole way along. So there was one stage when we were in Tasmania that I had applied for jobs in Broome and I got one. And we were going to drive, I think, 8 days straight to get to Broome for me to do this work. I just didn't feel like I had earned the right to sit there and relax and take in the scenery and just enjoy my family. I was way too busy in the mind to appreciate the moments that we had.
I can certainly attest to that as someone with lived experience as well, just not being able to relax. And that's where I turn to alcohol, is to slow the mind and feel kind of normal, slow the brain down so I can relax. Is that kind of the why we're using alcohol, do you think?
Yeah, I think so. It's just where I felt chilled and normal, and I didn't see a problem because I was making money. I was getting to work early every morning. I was working late every night. So I couldn't have a problem with alcohol because alcoholics sit in a park drinking out of a brown paper bag.
And there's a lot of shame and stigma associated with that. And I've been reflecting on my own journey recently. And since I turned 40, I've been sober since then. And I'm, in my 70s now. I can't give you the exact day today that we're recording, but it's that shame and stigma of associating myself with alcoholism, because I had that mental image of sitting on a park bench with a brown paper bag as well. I didn't feel like that was me. Like I felt like I was a much higher performer than that. Like nowhere near that kind of stereotype. And I know a lot of the guys that I work with have that same image. And so they don't want to say, I struggle with alcohol, or I'm an alcoholic, or I want to go to AA. There's very much of I think very much of a taboo topic still today.
Yeah, definitely. So I put it into my mind that last Anzac Day would be my last day of drinking alcohol. So I didn't go over the top as I would have previously. I had a few beers, and then the next day is when I stopped drinking. So I'm just over 6 months and feeling amazing.
Yeah. So you've had the crash after your career and the birth of your beautiful daughter, the Ruffy. Where did wellness come into you? Where did you start to get well again?
2 years after I was hospitalised the first time, I ended up back in that same hospital 2 years to the day. And I would say there would have been 80% of the same people in there lining up every morning to get their medication, to get knocked out and go back to bed. I started questioning some things. I wasn't feeling well, obviously, being back in hospital. And the answer for everything was just have some Valium, go back to bed and just sleep it off. And I went, well, I'm not even 40 yet. I'm pretty sure I've got more to life than going through this. I spoke to my doctor about some techniques about getting off medication, which he had absolutely no interest in. So I found a psychiatrist that would. And I started researching other ways to naturally improve my mental health, which led me down the path of yoga, meditation, mindfulness. I got into some essential oils, CBD oil, exercise, eating right. And I just worked out that if I want to get better, it's up to me. No one out there is there to help me get better.
I want to talk about the yoga and the meditation, because you had such a busy mind, and then to go into yoga and meditation where we want to have calm mind, but initially our mind still race. And I find it really challenging to go into a meditative state, or even to try and do yoga sometimes. What benefits, or first, before we get to the benefits, how much of a struggle was it to do yoga and meditation for you initially?
Meditation still is a struggle for me, but there's plenty of different types of meditation that you can do. But yoga, to start with, I did it in hospital that time, the second time I was hospitalised. We just did a couple of classes on YouTube, and once I got out of my head, I went, that was pretty good. I didn't think about anything else that whole time apart from me breathing, not falling over and not farting, which is 99% of what yoga is. So once I got out of hospital, I called up my local studio and said, whatever it is that you do here, I need to be here every day. So I think I paid for an annual membership up front, and I started going to all of the hard classes because I thought I need to be sweating, I need to be working, again, because I don't deserve to relax.
Yeah. Did you find a particular style of yoga that worked better for you? I know there's some different styles.
So I was doing vinyasa yoga every morning. So that's more of your moving flow strength sort of class. So I was doing a 6 a.m. class every day. And I did that for probably about 9 months. And then I tried a yin yoga, which is the exact opposite. So it's your yang and your yin. Your yin is holding poses for between 4 and 7 minutes and a lot kinder to your mind and body. And once I did a few of those and could kind of get out of my head, I went, this is exactly where I need to be. And I need to work out how to teach this to people because everyone needs to know about this.
When I first did my yoga, it was about 2020 when I burnt out, and I had this mysterious back pain that I needed to do something. So I tried Pilates and yoga. But one of the things that kind of held me back a little bit at first was this notion that these aren't manly things to do. And I did find a men's yoga, and so we're all stiff wooden planks, and there's a lot of farting going on. There's one guy that fell asleep almost every session at the end. Did you find that like it was a play on your sense of what it means to be a man to go and do yoga?
It did to start with, but then once you get into it, yoga's been a male only thing for thousands of years. And it was only the early 1900s that women were actually allowed to practice, got taken to Hollywood and popularized. So this had been a men's practice for thousands of years. I'm lucky the studio that I was going to used to have, I'd say, at least a quarter of the participants were men. And by the time I finished there, it would have been half, I'd say. And it was, I guess, it's very welcoming for men to be there. I think a lot of women like having the male energy around them as well in these sorts of spaces. So it's a perfect combination for male and female.
And so you've become a yoga teacher or yoga instructor, and you do some work with frontline yoga. Is that right?
Yeah, so I did my yoga teacher training the opposite to how most people do it. So I did 100 hours of yin yoga teacher training to start with. And then I did restorative, which is teaching you pretty much how to prop your body to take every bit of pressure off. And then you're staying in poses for 15 to 25 minutes. And then I did my 200-hour traditional yoga teacher training where you learn your hatha and vinyasa styles. I've taught for the last few years at various studios, only teaching yin yoga, which is the more restorative, mindful side. And I combine mine with essential oils and sound healing at the end. Mine's all about lengthening the mind over the body. I have a lot of elderly people that come to classes, a lot of people with injuries. So we just get them set up in a safe way, however their body looks, but it's all about what's going on up here, just adding to some plasticity through the mind. All of the teaching that I've done over the years has all been voluntary. I don't feel right charging for what I do. I think everyone should be able to get yoga for free, which I'd love to be able to provide on a bigger scale. But at the beginning of this year, I connected with Frontline Yoga, who provide free yoga for all frontline workers. So that picks up your doctors, nurses, SES, Marine Rescue, and of course the military and first responders, plus anyone else in the community that doesn't fit into that category can come along by donation. So I started running that in a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu gym here on the Sunshine Coast, which was awesome for the padded floor, as all of my classes are on the floor. I really wanted to get it into a yoga studio, and there's another yoga studio up here, Zenko Yoga, which is also owned by a veteran who was trying to get free yoga in there for military and emergency services. So I just said, well, I'm doing it already, so how about I provide that in your studio? So that's a free weekly yoga every Saturday afternoon.
Do you find that you being a vet helps inspire other vets to come into the class as well?
I think it does. So I don't share now, but I used to share my story at the start of every class. So that would especially help new people to understand that I'm not just a yoga teacher. I've been exactly where they are, and I've come out the other side with a lot of work and continued work, but just to show them that it is definitely possible to get out of the feelings that they're in at the moment and to use these practices to be able to assist them along the way.
And have you noticed any positive outcomes for some of the people coming along?
Definitely. So I used to have a lady who I would share my story every week. She would come. She wouldn't really talk to me. She'd just come to everything that I ran. She'd listen to my story. She'd do her yoga and then go away. And after about 6 months, she came up to me and said she'd been on antidepressants for 35 years. And just from coming here, listening to the story, practicing yoga, she had gone down to a quarter of what she'd been on. And she was planning on using her doctor's guidance to be able to get off. And I put that down to just a positive mindset of seeing what can happen when you really want it to.
That's amazing, because one of the things that held me back for 2 years before I went and saw my GP for the first time was this shame or stigma associated with being on medication. In the last 11 years, there's only been a couple times where I've been off medication, one for about a year, which was the most successful. At the moment, I'm back on my medication just because I'm trying to find balance as well. But it sounds by developing our brain muscles or our mind muscles, we can combat some of these mental health conditions, not just PTSD, but you talked about generalized anxiety, substance abuse as well. It must be a really powerful thing to grow this muscle that we often neglect.
Yeah, I think it is. And it is mindset. I know so many people out there where I say, all right, let's come and do this. And they'll go, I can't, I've got depression, or I've got PTSD, I can't do that. And I think with that sort of mindset, then you're exactly right. If you say you can't do it, then you can't. If you say you can do it, then you can. It's just about switching the way that we talk to ourselves, the way our mind programs. I guess we can trick our mind. Whatever we tell it, our mind can believe. So if we're telling it that we're unwell and we're never going to get better, then that's exactly what the mind's going to do.
Now, to move on from the yoga, you're also passionate about your volunteering as well. And Buddy Up Australia, before we met, I'd never heard of Buddy Up Australia. So I'm keen to hear what it is and what you do. I believe you're the Sunshine Coast chapter leader. So if you could just talk us through that, that'd be great.
Yeah, so Buddy Up Australia is a national organisation. It's set up to support current and ex-serving military, first responders and their immediate families by providing physical activities, social activities and volunteering back in our community. It was started over in Perth in 2018 and I heard about it in 2020 when I was down in Foster, New South Wales. A mate of mine who I'd met through the wellness fields over in Perth went to a Buddy Up event and then called me up and said, you need to talk to this mob. This is exactly what you need to be doing, because he knew that I was trying to start my own not-for-profit, but wasn't in the headspace to be able to get it up off the ground. So to be able to tap into another organisation that was already in place, established, and very much aligned with what I was trying to do, I learnt about it and went, yep, this is me. So I started this down in Foster, New South Wales, early 2020, built it up there over the years. And as I'd been travelling from there up to the Sunshine Coast to be with my daughter every couple of weeks, I started it up here again a couple of years ago. Had a few people in key roles there to get it going, but it never really took off until I was here, because I had the time to put into it, plus the passion and the knowledge of what I'd been doing down there that worked. So once I got up here permanently at the beginning of this year, I handed over the Foster chapter to a couple of lovely ladies down there who are now running it and growing it, and I focused on the Sunshine Coast chapter. So up here now we run regular activities, and I just run stuff that I want to do, because if no one rocks up, then I'm getting something out of it, and B, things that have worked for me and aren't going to be traditionally prescribed by your doctor. So we do our weekly yoga, we do regular equine therapy, we did a sourdough making workshop the other week, we've got some silversmithing workshops, kite surfing. So we just run a lot of mindfulness activities where we can just switch off in a safe environment surrounded by like-minded people.
Yeah, and do you have a lot of people that come to the groups? What does a group look like?
All depends what it is. So I just have to keep adjusting with how things go. So we've got a lot of good practitioners on here that I've connected with that seem to be popular to start with, but now the sort of information sessions have dwindled off a little bit. So we're just sticking to more physical activities. So we did go-karting last week. We had 20 people rock up for go-karting. Yoga is growing. So it is for frontline yoga, but I advertise through the veterans and emergency services space as well. So I think last week we had 9 come to that, which is a pretty good turnout. We've got a wreath making workshop happening tomorrow, making our own wreaths to lay on Remembrance Day. We've got 12 people booked in for that. Had an art workshop last week with 12 people. So 10 to to 20 seems to be the general number for physical activities. So, it's still new and growing. And as you said, not too many people have heard about it. We don't have a huge membership, but our members are there because they want to engage. They're not just there to watch along.
It sounds really cool. And we'll be putting the links into the show notes for anyone who's listening who wants to check it out. By all means, you can click on the link and get in contact. But I'm interested about your passion for volunteering. Where does this come from?
I think it was my first day in hospital initially. I was still in a very, very bad way when I got there. I think I had to wait in the emergency department for 12 hours for me to sober up enough to go up to the mental health unit. And when I got there, I just wanted to help people. Day one, I went from my focus in life was making money and having all the shiny shit to show off to people, to then I went, I need to work out how I can stop as many people as possible ending up exactly where I am now. I had someone that I served with in the military come and visit me in hospital. I hadn't seen him for over 10 years or heard from him, but he heard that I was in hospital, and he was part of a military motorcycle club. He came and visited me. And as soon as I got out, I started hanging out with them, and we used to go into Brisbane City every week and do a street feed for the homeless. And that really tickled all the bits inside me that needed tickling. And I got so much out of giving, which had not been in my life at all until that point.
That's amazing. And so what's next for you? Like, what's on the horizon? Have you got some big plans for the future?
I'm going to continue what I'm doing for Buddy Up. I'm continuing my frontline yoga. Plus, we've got Young Veterans, which is another national organisation. So they're pretty big all over Australia. And they've just asked me here on the Sunshine Coast to run the events for them. So I'm going to be the new volunteer events manager for them, which will just give me more reach to more people to get some more good work out there. Way down the track, if I could create the space, I'd love to set up a not-for-profit yoga studio to make accessible to anyone that needs yoga. That's just a bit beyond my scope at the moment of getting that up and running, but that's ideally what I'd like to have.
That sounds really cool. I'll be eager to watch this, and maybe I can pop along and try and stretch out these terrible hamstrings that I've got.
Definitely.
But Shane, for anyone who's listening, maybe they're struggling with substance abuse, maybe they're drinking their sorrows away, maybe they've got PTSD or anxiety or some other sort of mental health condition. Based on what you've gone through, what's some advice that you could give them to encourage them maybe to seek some help?
It's definitely the first time that you go and talk to someone, it'll feel like you've been carrying around 20 kilos on your shoulders and it's just been removed. I know it's very cliche, but the first time I unloaded all of my stuff, I just felt a foot taller and so much lighter. It was awesome just to get it off my chest. And then when you find yourself, I guess, looking for ways to get better, you'll find communities. And I think community is absolutely massive with healing and happiness. So when you start looking into the happiest people in the world and the people that live the longest, they're part of a community. They're socializing with friends, family, colleagues every day. And just to find a group of people that work along the lines of what you want to do and just delving into that. And if the people that you've been surrounding yourself with up until now aren't leading you along the right path, then maybe it's time to step away from them a little bit and lean into some new people, some new supports that are going to lift you up in the direction that you want to go.
Yeah, I love that. I love that how you brought up community as well, the importance of community, because it is so big. And often I'm saying in the one-to-one work that I do with guys is, where's your community? Who can we bring in? Who do we need to kick out of your community because they're bringing you down? All that type of stuff. So community is a huge thing. But Shane, if anyone's interested to learn more about you, do you have some social media or anything like that? Or is it go through to the other websites?
Pretty much go through to the websites, or you can search me on Facebook. I've got an open profile and I'm happy to receive messages from anyone, anywhere. I chat about this to as many people as I can. So I'm very passionate. I've got the time. I've got the passion. Yeah, if you want to reach out, if you want to come to one of my yoga classes or one of our events, just reach out. So I don't say no to anyone.
Perfect. And we'll be putting all the links in the show notes as a reminder, so you can click on those easy and get those contact details. But Shane, I've really valued our chat today. It's great to see you again and hear your story and the great work that you're doing in the volunteering space. I'm excited by the yoga because I have a bit of a small passion for yoga. It's not as big as yours, but I have certainly had some personal benefits from it as well. But the last thing I like to ask all my guests is to plug something that makes you feel good at the moment. And the reason I ask this is because we do talk about some heavy stuff on the show. And so if we can leave the audience with something that you're watching or listening to or reading, or maybe it's a self-care activity that you're really vibing with, maybe they can be encouraged to go check it out for themselves too.
It's not going to be for everyone, but meditation. So I did a day-long meditation course 40 days ago, and we've just today finished our 40 days of meditation. And that can be anything from sitting still for 10 minutes or doing a guided meditation, but just allowing your brain 10 minutes a day to just not focus on the busyness of life and just see what comes up for you, just with that little bit of rest for your mind.
Yeah, I love that. Do you have a specific meditation like app or program that you use, or do you use a variety?
I do use a variety. I use the Calm app every night for sleep, or then there's Insight Timer, which has got thousands of free meditations on there, and you can go through and search for something that you want or that resonates with you. But I just did a yoga nidra yesterday, which translates to yogic sleep. It's pretty much laying there and you get guided through a body scan, just checking different parts of your body, and doing that just switches this off for half an hour. And it might feel pointless when you first do it, but then you get to the end of it and go, I did not think about anything apart from my body for that whole time. So that's yoga nidra on Insight Timer is a big one.
Awesome. Thanks so much for sharing that. But Shane, thanks so much for coming on. I really have appreciated it. And all the best for the future. I look forward to following your journey.
No worries. Thanks for having me on.
Well, that's a wrap for today's episode, and I hope you got some value from it. If anything triggered your mental health today, please reach out to your support networks. Also, if you loved what you heard, be sure to subscribe to the show and share it with your mates. For more from Mindful Men, you can check us out on Instagram and YouTube, and I'll throw the links to these pages in the show notes below. But until next time, stay mindful.